The candidates tournament starts on the 17th of March. 8 players battling it out to see who will become the challenger to face Magnus Carlsen in a World Championship match in November. So I'm profiling all 8 participants, and now it's the turn of Anish Giri. Well, he qualified for the tournament by virtue of the fact that he had the highest average rating between February 2019 and January 2020. His rating slipped a little bit during that time, but not so much as to cancel out where he started at the beginning of 2019. Well, he had a couple of very good results in the Tata Steel tournament that really boosted his rating. So Tata Steel 2018, he came equal first, and in 2019, he came second. Excellent results. And they brought him up in February 2019 to number 4 in the world with a rating of 27.97, almost pushing over the 2800 barrier. Now, Giri did not play in the Candidates 2018. He missed out, and I think it really has been his absolute focus over the past 2 years to qualify for the Candidates 2020. I interviewed him during the Isle of Man tournament in 2018, and you could see that already. You know, he was already absolutely focused on maintaining a really high rating. This was kind of his insurance policy if he didn't get through in the other routes, and he realized already at that time that he had a good chance just because of this, through this highest average rating. He played in the Candidates in 2016, notoriously making draws in every single one of his games, and well, he's been the butt of criticism for that over the past few years. In fact, you know, if you look at those games in 2016, he had many promising positions. I'm not going to say he was unlucky not to get more, but I think it's clear that he has the potential. You know, this very high rating, number 4 in the world at the beginning of 2019, this was not some kind of blip. In January 2016, he was actually number 3 in the world with a rating of 27.98. We know that he's a really class act. He plays, I think, very correct chess. I wouldn't describe him as a gambler, but technically he's superb. His openings are excellent. He prepares incredibly well to extraordinary depth. And I think he could be a very serious contender in this candidates tournament. It's doubtful whether it'll be a really high scoring event. And in that case, you can just imagine Giri playing solidly, making draws, but nicking the odd win. Well, he could easily be right up there as a contender. He could win it. Just watch out for him. He had a poor tournament in the Tata Steel 2020. Only made 50%, but actually, I think we should disregard that completely. You know, he is focused on the candidates, and as he said himself, basically, you know, he was playing his B game. He wasn't showing, you know, any great opening surprises. So I think he's basically stored it up for the candidates tournament. I think he's, as far as his style goes, he's at his happiest when he's grinding away very technically. There are a few games that come to mind, but one in particular, his game against Topalov. I think it's might have been in Shamkir a few years ago. Absolutely superb technical performance. And I want to show you another absolutely beautiful technical game that was played in Bucharest in the Grand Chess Tour tournament in November 2019. So this is against Wesley So. Now it's only a rapid game, but in a way that makes it in some ways even more impressive. So it's Catalan, and the line that both players selected is very popular at the highest levels. they reach an endgame at a very early stage. Now, white takes on c5, and you can see that, well, we get a queen exchange. So simplifications from the word go. Now, this is attractive for players of the white pieces because you can play with virtually no risk. You have this wonderful Catalan bishop striking across the board. Black's bishop on c8, so often the problem in the candidates, a little bit passive. So white gets back this pawn. Black at least manages to damage the structure a little bit. And white just has very pleasant piece play here. From black's viewpoint, black is super solid. A bit worse, but if you are technically very good, then you can kind of limit the damage here. So yeah, popular with those players in elite tournaments that don't mind making a draw with black and having to suffer a little bit. And both players have played this previously. Giri has played this with white and black. Wesley So I think has only played it with black, but I could be wrong. So you can see very regular development from both players. And now, well, it's really important that white tries to generate activity with his pieces to make up for this very slight structural disadvantage, this isolated pawn on c5. But because of, well, you can see all white's minor pieces are active, and that makes up for this slightly damaged pawn structure. The knight's hopped in on d6, doesn't look bad, and I think understandably this was taken off. So, well, with that bit of activity, Giri has won the two bishops. But black is still absolutely solid here. Good pawn structure. And with the retreat of this knight, so it allows the bishop to come into play. There we go. Finally, this bishop manages to match white's bishop on g2. As I mentioned, this is a very popular line with the top guys, and there have been a few games here where white has actually played f3 to keep the two bishops. Now, of course, it blocks this one in temporarily, but it's also worth exploring. It keeps more tension in the position, actually. But Giri, well, plays very soundly and gets rid of that isolated pawn. So he plays by the rules. That's very typical of him. Exchange of bishops, so it's not so serious where white has one bishop, but more on that a little bit later. And the knight comes back and forces white to make a decision with his pawn. Giri exchanges, and an exchange here. No time to take because the rook will be able to come back. So we have an equal endgame. There's just a couple of factors that make this more comfortable for white. Really, white is the only one with winning chances. One is the bishop. It's a long-range piece. It can look at both sides of the board. And the fact that this pawn is just a little bit weakened. I mean, it wouldn't make a difference if the pawn stood here and if black had recaptured with the knight. That would also have been a little bit problematic. So, yeah, those things add up to a pleasant position for white. And really, in games between top players, I think you could say only two results are possible. It's either going to be a win for white or a draw, and most likely a draw. Well, Wesley So had actually played this on two previous occasions, once against Sugirov and one against Ding, and made two draws. So he must have been very confident. And I think also this shows the level of Giri's preparation. He will have known these games. So we're on move 24 already, and Giri is following these previous games, and that is not untypical for him. Here, Ding played King d3, against So in Stavanger 2019. And after b5, well, Ding didn't get anywhere. You can see that this pawn controls these squares. The knight controls these squares. It's actually very difficult for White's king to break through. If the king could break through, then you can see how close it is to the pawn on b5. But he couldn't find a way through. And, well, after a few more moves, they agreed a draw. Ding tried a little bit, but you can see that Black is rock solid in this position. It's actually very hard for White to get anywhere at all, and, well, they soon made a draw. You can see, let me just point out all these squares. They're all covered by the knights and the pawns, so the king can't gain entry. So let's just bear that in mind when we come back to this position. So Black has just played king f8. And here is where Ding played king d3. And now, the shocking novelty that Giri made on move 26 was knight d4. And I'm sure this was part of his preparation. So he's 26 moves deep already. He's very professional. And here, Wesley, I think understandably, he wanted to simplify the position. He exchanged off. Maybe he should have played knight to a5. But anyway, let's see what happened. Knight takes and king takes. Well, you can see this is a very different position to the one in Ding against So, because already with the exchange of those knights, it means it's easier for White's king to come across and try and attack that pawn. It's also on a black square. Now, if it advanced here, there is still potentially a route through via c3 and b4. So king e7. Let's see what difference this makes. Well, Wesley decides to hurry across with his king to defend that pawn, but it's on a black square. That's quite handy with the dark square bishop. So can Giri somehow engineer a Zugzwang here? Now, at the moment, just attacking the pawn like this, well, it's probably not going to do too much. So Giri starts the squeeze on the king side. This is classic play. Basically wants to try and fix Black's pawns. And you never know, he might try and dive over with his king at some moment. When the position opens up, as we'll see. That can happen. Knight f6. And now bishop e3. This is a critical moment in the game. And I think Wesley ducked the challenge here. I think maybe if he'd had more time in a classical game, then he would have found the best solution. And I think he should take this pawn. Now, this unbalances play. And I think that's why he was reluctant to chance it in this position. You can see if this pawn were to advance all the way here, the king would have to go in the corner, and then this king would have a chance to come across, take some pawns. The only thing is, in the meantime, this knight can actually hassle the kingside pawn. So actually, it's not that clear. And I think actually Black should get enough counterplay here. You can see it can hassle pawns and maybe even hassle the king as well. But it's touch and go, and I can understand why Wesley avoided that. But instead he ducked and simply came back to defend the pawn. But now the squeeze starts, and this is actually very unpleasant. So basically, Black is going to run out of pawn moves, and then we can do some interesting things with the bishop. So these pawns, well, in one way or another, they're going to be fixed. And here you go, they do get fixed. So now Black is just waiting. The king and knight can't move away from the protection of this pawn. Fine, that's just a waiting move. We need to advance this pawn anyway. And now we wait again. Black waits and bishop d4. Now, if we could put that bishop on d8, then the position would be Zugzwang. Black would have to give ground. The king and the knight couldn't move. The king wouldn't be able to move to c7. So just bear that in mind. Bishop here. So here is the crunch moment, and actually black is lost already. So for example, if king b7, then bishop d8, and this is Zugzwang. Knight can't move away. Take here. If king here, then the king moves in, and then we'll be able to take this. Alternatively, knight c5, which could be tricky, but no. We have this, a check, and then a5, undermining the knight, and well, we'll be able to play a6 and roll on in that position. Let's come back here. We've got knight f8, but now, yeah, we've got a tricky little Zugzwang coming up again. So here we go. Knight only has one square, e3, and well, this is a beautiful position and illustrates perfectly the power of the bishop against the knight. So the bishop covers all these squares. The knight cannot move to f6, so the knight is completely stymied. And if king a7, then king c6, and if king c8, then king c6, and again, black has just run out of moves, basically. This pawn can be collected. Actually, it's even worse than that. The knight is gone in this position. If you just look at this, total domination of that piece. So in the game, after bishop f6, Wesley tried h6. Well, this is just desperation, but was met with a beautiful winning move, actually, bishop d8 check, and Wesley resigned. Obviously if the king moves here, then white can just take on h6. So king takes bishop, take on h6, the knight has to come over to stop it, king takes b6, and now the pawn threatens to roll through, so king c8, and now white's king just heads towards the king side and just mops up all the pawns. Brilliant technical performance from Anish Giri, and I think that's his perfect kind of game. Deep opening research, so that he's not going to put a foot wrong in the opening. Novelty on move 26. Better endgame, and his technique was such that he managed to grind out a win absolutely beautifully. So don't write Anish Giri off. He is, I think, number 11 in the world. Let me just check. Yeah, number 11 in the world, rated 2763. It's a bit below some of the others, but he could well be a contender.